2:30, Mr. Nicoletti asked me how would I feel in supporting him and backing him up on this. And he told me I wouldn't fire unless it became extremely necessary. And I told Mr. Nicoletti, I said, Jesus, I'd be honored to do anything to back you up. And he asked me, he says, where would you, he said, as it goes outside, if you was to be outside here, he said, where would you position yourself at in Dealey Plaza? And I told him, I said, well, I said, I'm looking everything over and from walking in the week that I've been down here. I said, I think I would choose up there behind the tree behind that stockade fence on the high ridge by the knoll up there. And he says, why there? I said, well, I've got the railroad yard and back up in there. We've got a parking lot there. And I've got a place to where I could stash whatever I would need. I said, and I can pass off myself office of work in the railroad yard for the time being until that time comes. And nobody would really pay any attention to me. And he asked me then, he says, where do you think would be the best place for me? I said, well, I think the Dowtech building with the new change in it, I think the Dowtech building over there would give you the best advantage point there. And he said, I think so too. So we took a walk over, went through the parking lot over by the tracks, walked around through there, and he seemed pretty well pleased with that. And then at that point, it was about 11:10, he asked me what weapon would I choose to use over there. And I told him, I said, I would like to use the fireball. He says, why that one? He said, you've only got one shot. And I said, one shot's all I'm going to get anyway if I wait until the last moment of firing. I may not fire. I said, and it's easy to conceal. I carry in the briefcase, and nobody will pay any attention to him, and it's easier to walk away from there. And that's exactly what we did at that point. And shortly before noon, we went back to the vehicle. I took the briefcase out and turned my jacket inside out. I went back into the yard, and the railroad yard there. I secured the briefcase. And then I hung out back there, and I walked down on the grassy knoll. I looked things over. Nobody paid any attention. People were gathering. And shortly before the motorcade came, I went back up there and started securing myself in a better position so I'd be able to reach the attaché case at that point, the briefcase. Excuse me. And I knew once that I opened the briefcase up and pulled the weapon out, nobody's going to be looking at me. The motorcade would be coming, making its first turn, and I wouldn't have to remove the fireball from the briefcase until approximately they made the turn on Elm Street there. And I would have plenty of time at that point. And at that point, when they started proceeding down Elm Street, shots started being fired from behind, and I assumed that it was Mr. Nicoletti, because he was the one that was in the building, and I knew that Johnny Roselli was there. And I remember the shots ringing out, and even though the president was being hit with the rounds, I was considering it a miss because I knew that we were going for a headshot on the president. And I had known he had been hit in the body, but I didn't know what part at that time. And I seen the body lurch, and I saw the body lurch again. I heard another shot that missed, and we were supposed to hit no one but Conley. I mean, no one but Mr. Kennedy. And I guess Governor Conley got hit with one of the rounds at that point. And I wasn't even sure of that because I was keeping Kennedy as best I could in the scope on the fireball. And when I got to the point where I thought it would be the last field of fire, I had zeroed in to the left side of the head there that I had, because if I waited any longer, then Jacqueline Kennedy would have been in the line of fire. And I had been instructed for nothing to happen to her. And at that moment, I figured this is my last chance for a shot, and he still had not been hit in the head. So as I fired that round, Mr. Nicoletti and I had fired approximately at the same time as the hit started forward, then it went backward. And when I would have to say that his shell struck approximately 1,000th of a second ahead of mine, maybe, that's what started pushing the head forward, which caused me to miss in the left eye, and I came in on the left side of the temple. And at that point through the scope, I witnessed everything, matter and skull, being blown out to the back of the limousine, and everyone on television watching saw Jackie Kennedy crawl out there to get it. And I watched her hold on her hand to crawl back in the car, and I put the fireball back into the briefcase and closed it up, and I'd pull my jacket off, reverse my jacket, so I would have, instead of a plaid slide out, I would have the gray like a dress jacket, more or less. And I put a cap on my hat to walk away with carrying a briefcase.
How did you exit the plaza?
When I exited the plaza, I walked to the edge of the stockade fence. I did not walk down the steps. I walked back over across the grass to the dead-end street that ends there by the parking lot. And I proceeded to, I believe that's Houston, cross Houston and went into the Dowtech parking lot. And when I got into the car, Mr. Nicoletti was already in the car, and so was Johnny Roselli. And I got in the car and drove away.
What happened to the shell casing that you fired at John Kennedy?
The shell casing that I fired at John Kennedy, when I took it out of the weapon, it's one of those moments when you feel like you're above everything else, and I guess I was a little bit cocky with it all. I took the casing, I put it in my mouth while I put another casing cartridge into that one. Before putting it into the case, and as I started to leave, I took the casing and I bit down on the casing to leave teeth marks on it, and then I set the casing as a symbol right on top of the stockade fence, which I know I should have never done, but I did that. And over the years, through other people, I have left certain trademarks along the way. But the casing was mine. It had teeth marks on it. No one knew it was teeth marks here until recently in 1994. And they just had that examined to find out that it was teeth marks on there. But I left it more or less as a signature of my calling card.
Your trade?
You might say my trade.
How did John Roselli and Charles Nicoletti get into the Daltex building?
That I could not say, but I would believe they went through the front door, and we had a side door that they would be exiting from, and I had parked this burgundy-colored Chevrolet there, the 63 that I was driving. I had parked that into the lot there. But when they entered the Daltex building, I was not there. I was beyond sight, back into the railroad yard at that point.
Are you sure they were in that Daltex building?
I'm positive, because I had the car parked there. They were going to come out through the doors and put their weapon. Well, Johnny Roselli had no weapon. Charles Nicoletti was the one that carried the rifle in there, and that had been secured, and he put that back into the trunk of the vehicle, and I knew that was in the trunk because it was still there when I got to the motel, took it out, because that was the plan, was for him to come back, put his in the trunk. I would have the briefcase. I would slide it under the steering wheel. Johnny Roselli was sitting in the back seat. Charles Nicoletti was sitting in the right front passenger seat. I opened the door of the Chevrolet, got in, and drove out. As I come out of the parking lot, I made a right-hand turn onto Houston Street.
Where did you go after that?
After that, I don't remember just how many blocks I proceeded ahead, but I went, maybe 5, 6 blocks ahead to a major street. I took a left, went up a few more blocks by the expressway where there was an intersection there, an underpass. They had a gas station there. They had another car waiting there for them. They got out of the vehicle I was in. They walked across the parking lot. I never saw which way they went. I turned from there, made a right, and I headed back out to Mesquite. And I went back to the hotel, pulled into the parking lot, parked my vehicle there, secured it, went to the room that I already had rented, that I'd been in all week. At that point, I went in to strip myself, to shower. I used the hot wax to remove any resin from the skin pores. And when I finished with the details I had to do there, I waited until it was dusk, dark time. Then I went out and I removed all the gun cases that had been put back into the car, brought everything into the unit, cleaned those, secured everything. And later, as after midnight, where there was no activity, I went back out. I pulled the back seat in the car, and I put the weapons back in behind the seat where they belonged, where we had a compartment for them. I went back in, went to sleep, waited till daylight. And then I drove from there back to southern part of Illinois, on 66 there, and stayed overnight there. Then drove the rest of the way the next day into Chicago, because I had been instructed in the beginning, when I went to Texas, not to be driving at nighttime, not to be pulled over by any police officers, not to speed, and only travel during daylight hours. So there'd be no questions asked. And I had always been good at following orders.